When it comes down to discussing to which monsters are placed in a hypothetical hierarchy in the world of Monster Hunter, it's always a fun and engaging topic to list down the candidates for the top spot, or more so, the apex predator for a particular environment. One of these candidates that's been discussed over the past couple of days is the flagship for Monster Hunter World. At a surface level, it is straightforward to assume that something like a Nergigante would fit the role of the top predator for any given territory. And it's pretty simple to understand why. It eats elder dragons. You really don't have a much clearer answer as that. Imagine being that much of an absolute bastard in the ecosystem that your daily diet consists of the class of monsters that either destroys or controls the literal ecosystem. To put it bluntly, most people would come to the conclusion that this spiky lad is a pretty clear choice for being one of the monsters that are untouchable when it comes to being the apex. However, I would argue that even though as batshit as the Nergigante is when it comes to his role in the ecosystem, I wouldn't necessarily peg him so highly as, say, a Geismagorm. Yes, I would say that it is impressive for this utter unit to bulldoze and bully away legitimate threats like a Kushal Deora or a Teostra, but by being more grounded and realistic in terms of power scaling and comparing abilities, the Nergigante to me is more akin to a solid middle power when it comes to ranking all the Elder Dragons in the series. I mean, in no way, shape or form does this make the Nergigante any less threatening. However, I do think that when you really compare the Nergigante to the rest of the high tier threats that you'd encounter, it's actually a 50-50 in my opinion. Yes, give him any of the flagships and some of the more common Elder Dragons like the Teostra, and obviously he would come out on top. But when you go further into the list, and I'm talking endgame level threats like the Shigara Magala, Narwa, Geismagorm, hell even Diamatsu, and then you can see why the power comparison gets a bit iffy against the Nergigante. And no, Shar Ishvalda does not count because it's the variant of the Nergigante that took that thing down in Iceborne. I'm talking strictly of the base form for the Nergigante, and it's pretty safe to say that this consumer of elders isn't necessarily the demolisher of all things Elder Dragon as some would think. Let's go through the elders that it hunts. Things like the Kushal Deora and the Teostra from earlier would make sense for the Nergigante to beat, because when you think of it, those dragons are technically a hunter's first Elder Dragon hunt. And that includes other more easier Elder Dragons in the franchise like the Chameleos, the Kirin, Zoromagdaros and so forth. These are just common and more familiar Elder Dragons in the franchise that we've grown accustomed to encounter once we've reached high rank. So we don't really put these Elder Dragons on the same level as, say, an Alatrion or a Dalmador, G-rank specific threats that are not to be fucked with. And it's these G-rank threats that I would think the Nergigante would not really fare too well in a fight. In no way, shape or form would something that has no elemental abilities or special attributes would go on top against, say, an unstable avatar of the elements or a vampiric monstrosity that has a symbiotic relationship with blood-sucking flying leeches. There is just no way in my opinion. Let's even go far to say that a basic form of Nergigante would struggle against high-level non-Elder Dragon threats like, say, a Furious Rajang or a fucking Scorn Magnamalo. And a major reason why I think of this is because pure strength and power just doesn't equal total domination on a whole class of monsters in the series. I am just not convinced that this oversized hedgehog can out-wrestle even a regular Magnamalo, which may I add also bullies Elder Dragons like the Teostra or the Kushal Deora. If anything, in the role that the Nergigante plays with regards to the whole ecosystem thing, I would much describe the Nergigante as some sort of overpowered vulture or hyena. And what I mean by that is that the Nergigante fits the role of a opportunistic scavenger that has all the tools to have first dibs on whatever food source it can get its hands on. In world, the Zoromagdaros that you're trying to divert was close to dying, so its bioenergy would be extremely attractive for something like a Nergigante to take advantage of. And speaking of its propensity to fight and kill lesser elder dragons like the Goshaldiora, it's more so on the same level as a hyena going up against predators like a cheetah or a leopard in Africa. The role of an opportunistic scavenger that takes on weaker targets is a fairly common niche in an ecosystem. In one infamous example, there were theories of the Tyrannosaurus Rex being a scavenger rather than an active predator back in its day. So it would be a reasonable assumption to make the Nergigante as more of an opportunistic predator that takes what it can get, and to be honest, any forms of opinions of the Nergigante being among the top tier of monsters that can take on things that are way too far out of its league is simply too foolish. Like, I'd even put my money on something like the Narwhal to give this thing a run for its money. There is simply no way that the Nergigante is the apex of elder dragons that some people would have you to believe. Though, in all honesty, this doesn't really take away anything from the Nergigante as a whole. It's still an awesome flagship in the franchise. However, by being more realistic and logical when it comes to comparing who's on top, I'd say the Nergigante is somewhere in the middle to high tier in the ecosystem. Going in as a monster that relies on brute strength as well as its ability to regrow spikes, the Nergigante quite honestly only has the bare minimum in taking down more high level creatures. Something like a Malzeno would probably laugh at this thing. It would probably think that the Spike's ability is adorable. Elder dragons that have the ability to literally disrupt large-scale environments like the Frenzy Virus or the Kuro Infestation would have no problems infecting the Nergigante. And on the whole, it's just stupid for this thing to pick a fight with literal world enders like the Black Dragons, or basically any endgame Elder Dragon from Frontier. Plus, basically any top tier monster that has both strength and special abilities would utterly mop the floor with regrowth spikes, like the Scorned Magnemola that's previously mentioned. And for the fun of it, one Valstrax ambush would fucking vaporize poor Nergigante to pure mist. In conclusion, this spiky ridden menace is intimidating, but in no way, shape or form would it be competing for the top spot against actual endgame threats. Once again, a cool flagship, but please be realistic, please use your head, and don't have this poor thing getting killed for no reason against real threats in the franchise.